Today on this Mastering Warhammer 40k series, we are going to be talking about the 4 things that I think about at the start of any turn during a competitive match, whether it's for practice or during a tournament, really to help myself score as many points as possible while potentially giving my opponent the least amount of points. So if you're finding yourself in games or maybe in a tournament where you're feeling flustered at the top of the turn of what to do, how to develop a good game plan on the fly, please stick around because this video is definitely going to be for you. And we're really going to be simplifying some concepts today that I think are really going to help you improve your game very quickly after this video. And I will say, I am primarily a Necron player, but this video today is really tailored to anybody just getting into 40k, or maybe you've been in it for a little bit and you're just trying to sharpen the knife, so to speak, and just get better at the game and improve your skills. So I really want to appreciate you all and the support from the last mastering video. The response has been overwhelmingly positive, so I just appreciate you all watching and your feedback, and it really does mean a lot. And I just enjoy making these videos because I really do believe when one of us gets better, we all get better. So let's get into it. I don't want to waste any more time, and let's just start breaking this down. So 4 things we're going to be talking about today, and this goes through my head at the start of every turn and at the beginning of the game is 1, how am I scoring my secondaries? That is always the first thing. 2, how am I scoring my primary, and or how am I denying my opponent's primary in that turn if it's an option? The third thing, which I'm most excited about, is how am I screening? And the fourth is how am I denying my opponent's points, specifically secondary points, okay? So the first one that I'm going to talk about, which I think is the most simple, and I don't really see a lot of players doing, which they might adopt this at the end because it helps me not forget, is when it comes to screening. So a lot of times in games, I notice that we draw our secondaries, right? And you're looking at the board and you're like, okay, like I could, stuff is laid out here. And I will preface, I put some more, like we have world eaters today as just an example. This is not like a meta list or anything, but this is just for learning purposes. Okay, so just so you guys can just visually see units from the opposing side and how to handle it. But going back to screening, so typically what I will do in a game now, especially going from turn 1 to turn 2, is I will get in a good habit of, after I draw my secondaries, because a lot of times we will get flustered in terms of we'll start moving our pieces around and we're getting really excited because we like line something up and we're like, oh crap, okay, there's an opportunity we could take out Ingron here, and we've all been there, and then you get to the end of the turn and you're like, oh crap, like what were my secondaries? like we've all been there, right? So if that's happened to you, don't feel alone. It happens to the best of us. And a thing with that is because we get so tunnel vision on certain things, a lot of times we forget to screen during games. And if you didn't get a chance to watch my screening video from last week, definitely check that out because I dive a lot more into screening and strategies and tactics revolving that. But we're not going to be going over that today. I simply just want to show you a little trick in terms of how I never forget that. And we all have those little, if you don't have them yet, I would highly recommend you get like these 9-inch markers. A lot of times they hand them away for tournaments for free, or you can get them like on Etsy, something like that. It's really good to have like 2 or 3 of those. And all I do at the start of the turn is I will put them in the corner of the battlefield edges. Okay. So I will just line up 2 sticks. So I'm like at the top of the turn, I'm just going to put those sticks down. And it's a mental reminder for me, and it's a mental reminder for my opponent of where I need to screen. And that way there's no issue. Both opponents don't forget. It's very transparent. They can see it. It's just a win-win all around. And it's just, I just put them down. I don't think about screening, but it's just a reminder before I complete my movement phase that, oh, hey, like these sticks are still here. I need to make sure that these are lined up correctly, or I had the movement for it to make sure these corners are screened out. Because as we've talked about, screening is very important when it comes to denying your opponent's secondaries, which is the second point, okay? So the second point that always goes through my mind during a turn is how am I denying my opponent points? And a lot of the secondaries, as you know, are positional. We have behind enemy lines, we have locusts, we have engage in all fronts. All of these potentially require your opponent getting in your deployment zone or in your backfield. So it really is important to make sure that not only are you just screening, but you're also making sure that your entire deployment zone is covered in the early game, because you put your opponent in a situation where either it's very difficult for them to score those cards, or they have to spend a CP and cycle those secondaries, which you love seeing that too, right? So those are 2 of the 4. So the first one, how am I screening? I just put those sticks down in the corner. The second one is how am I denying my opponent's points, which a lot of it comes back to screening. But the second point of that is thinking about the other ones in terms of area denial, right? Storm hostile objective, overwhelming force. Those are really common ones. So when you're thinking as the game plan develops here, okay, so we're thinking about, so if let's just say hypothetically, I'm going first, and we are just going to, obviously, we're going to move our race up on our natural expansion. We're going to stage up all of this stuff back here. Obviously, these units would be stringed out. We're staying in all of our auras. Let's just say all of this stuff stages up here, okay? And let's say we're going to move Xeris up. We're going to play pretty aggressive this game. I don't know if I would actually do this against World Eaters, but hey, we're learning here concepts, okay? So we're going to move up the warrior brick. Maybe we hide Oricon and our characters behind a wall to try to protect them from precision, or maybe we just stage them behind here. So that's a good habit to get into. You're running units like this to try to prevent them getting precisioned out. And, oh, sorry, this is Xeris right here. So let's say we move up Xeris. Let's say we stage up this, right? And that's basically our turn. So we have the warriors. They're a pretty big brick, so it wouldn't surprise me if they could string out to like here. So we have our reanimator that stages up as well, which is just going to go up here, right? So you essentially screen this, this is all screened, right? And that's all screened, okay? So going back to secondaries, what I'm thinking about as well is overwhelming force and storm hostile. Those are some of the big ones first turn that your opponent can score very easily. So in this picture here, this is a good learning opportunity. Maybe turn 1, it's maybe not a good idea for me to put Xeris on this objective, right? Because if my opponent draws overwhelming force the first turn, they could probably kill Xeris and get free points. But I know, based on the way that I've built this specific list, that they're probably not going to be able to kill the warriors or the race in the first turn, which means that they're not going to be able to score overwhelming force. But just by this one simple play, by just putting him an inch on the objective, you potentially just gave your opponent 3 points. By keeping him an inch off the objective, you potentially deny them 3 points. And that is why movement is just so important in Warhammer 40k. That's what a lot of good competitive players always talk about. It's won and lost a lot of times in the movement phase. Dice are always going to be dice, and that's why I love this game so much, because there's so much that happens in the movement phase. So again, coming back to scoring secondaries, which is the second point, we're thinking about those. We're thinking about area denial, which, as you can see by this move, if I potentially went first, my opponent is going to have some way to kill these warriors. Otherwise, they're not going to get area denial. So a lot of things to think about there, right? So let's say it's my opponent, they're bottom of 1. Let's say also they're staging up. Angeron stages up. These things stage up. Berserkers go up here. He's on the point. We got Jackals back here screening. Let's say he's got like some spawn back here. So he's screening as well. He's a good player. Good, right? So the next thing that I'm always thinking about, top of turn, let's hit it here. So the third thing, going into 2, top of 2. Let's say first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my secondaries. And let's say I get no prisoners and containment. Okay? So looking at this board state right now, there's not really a lot that I can see, unfortunately. So no prisoners is probably going to be a dud. That's always going to be the first thing I think about before I move any of my pieces. Draw my secondaries. I'm putting my sticks down, right? 9, 9. How am I scoring my secondaries? Can I really, I don't move my pieces. I just look at the board. I think it's okay. Don't feel rushed. Just think about it for a couple minutes if you need to. And in order to just make the best informed decisions. So I can't score no prisoners, and then looking at how I can score containment. So I could drop a Locust Destroyer. I could move this out over here and contain, and then I could contain with one of these reanimators, and that simplifies my headspace there. Okay, and then I'm like, okay, no prisoners is going to be a dud this turn. We'll cycle it for a CP. That's fine. Then the second thing on the docket, going back to the beginning, is how am I denying my opponent primary or holding their objective? And so I'm looking at the board state right now, and I'm like, okay, he has these berserkers here. They're a lot of OC. They have blood surge, everything else. There's realistically no way that I can interact with them this turn, and that is something that Necrons struggle a little bit right now, as they don't have very strong ingress threats. Depending on your list, but it's hard for Awaken to really interact a lot of times with your opponent's natural expansion in an effective way outside of Tomb Blades or something like that, or if you're running potentially Race on the opposite side. But so in this board state, and the second thing that's going through my mind, I'm like, okay, I can cross off. There's no way for me to interact with their natural expansion this turn. There's no way for me to deny their primary. So how am I going to necessarily create a delta on primary this turn? And with this list specifically, it's by potentially holding the center or holding that classic triangle, right, that a lot of good players talk about. And the reason why the triangle works a lot of times really well is, one, especially for Necrons, is because we have a lot of auras. And so a lot of times your abilities or your auras are able to double dip on more units because you're closely packed together, and it allows other units to assist other objectives easier. So if they do try to assault this or assault this, it's a lot easier for these resources to come up here, right? And then vice versa. If they assault this objective, it's a lot easier for these resources to potentially come down here, right? But if I were to shift all of these and play a game plan of going after this objective and ignoring the center, then if they take over this, there's really no way for these resources over here to interact with this over here. Okay, so generally in Necrons and most builds, we're wanting to play that triangle style of play. Other armies don't necessarily have to play that way, but Necrons, for the most part, like that style. So that's the second thing that's going through them again. And then the third thing, again, going back to screening. So we put our sticks down, we're double checking our screening, check. And then the fourth thing is, how am I denying my opponent's points with the secondaries, right? So going back to here again, I'm looking at, okay, what have they drawn in the deck? And I will say, yes, you should be paying attention to that, but I think you can easily stress yourself out if you're looking at it in the first 3 battle rounds. I think it makes a lot more sense looking at it towards the end, like turns 4 and 5, and seeing what your opponent has left in the deck and potentially what you can do to deny those points. So a classic example, let's say you have bottom of turn scoring and they haven't drawn Overwhelming Force and Storm Hostile yet. You'll see a lot of good players potentially have things off the objectives because they're going to score primary on the end. So indirectly, they prevent you from getting Overwhelming Force and Storm Hostile because you don't have anything on objectives. And then at the end of the game, they just get back on the objectives and then score the points. So it's moves like that that we're thinking about last in line. But the top 3 things are the things that you need to think about going into every game. So coming full circle here, again, because I want to make sure this is just ingrained in your all's mind. So we get into the game. Before first turn even starts, again, we're going through. You're still thinking about, how am I scoring secondaries? And that starts right at the deployment. You guys have seen some of these deployment breakdowns. If you haven't, go check them out. And we talk about that. Make sure when you're deploying that you go through a mental checklist in your mind of okay, how am I scoring containment turn 1? So I know in this layout, okay, This Locust Destroyer is going to go over here. It's going to contain. This Reanimator is already going to be here, so it's going to contain. Containment, check. Good. How am I getting area denial? Okay, Warriors are going up towards the center. Boom, got it. How am I getting Locust? Xeris moves up. He gets within 6. Boom, he gets Locust. Okay, how am I getting engaged on all fronts? That one's going to be kind of rough on this layout, not going to lie. It would probably be a dud first turn. No prisoners. A lot of the kill secondaries are just going to be duds. That's just inevitable against good players. You're not going to score no prisoners, most likely. You're not going to be able to score mark for death. You can cycle behind first turn. Overwhelming force, same thing. That one's going to be a dud. But make sure you're easily able to get any of those positional secondaries, because those are free points, and you will literally just miss those points if you deploy incorrectly. So making sure you're checking that off the box. And then, again, going through, how am I holding my primary? I know in this deployment, I'm like, okay, I know Wraiths are going to go here first turn and just lock that down. And I know Warriors are going to try to go here first turn, okay? And then the third thing, again, is how am I screening? So we're making sure we're spreading everything out, covering our bases there. And then fourth is how am I denying my opponent's points, okay? So I think, honestly, my favorite tip of all that I hope you guys take away that has, I think, tremendously helped me is honestly just putting the sticks in the corner at the top of the turn. It is just a mental note. It's a mental reminder because I can't tell you how many games have been so close and I've lost because it's just been like I got lazy at screening and they were able to just fit a little 5-man of Storm Boys, some Aquilons, some Gene Stealers in the back, and you just gave them like a free 5 points or a free 8 points, so they're able to come in your backfield and then connect a 9-inch charge and take your home away. It's so important not to forget that step. So again, coming full circle, 4 things. Top of turn. All right, in your next game, go through them. Keep this video on hand when you're at your game or you're playing your game. How am I scoring secondaries? How am I scoring these before you move any of your pieces? Number 2, how am I denying primary? And how am I holding my own primary going into my turn? How am I screening? Okay. And then how am I denying my opponent points? Those are the 4 things. Just keep that in mind. Don't worry about, a lot of times people will get stressed, I feel like, about stuff that's not as on points. You always want to think about the points. Like if they give you, Angron here and there's no like kill secondaries, there's no way to potentially like interact with him or no way to like kill him, and it's kind of like a bait move, you always need to focus on what is on the points first, because that's that is what matters. Now I'm saying if they do give you Angron, I mean, obviously shoot at him, do what you can, but at the same time, don't let it distract you from the main game plan of focusing on the points. Okay, so hopefully this Mastering series helped you today. Again, really appreciate your all support. I'm going to link 2 videos up top. Check those out. And if you made it this long, seriously appreciate you watching. And we'll catch you on the next one.